The language of flight here is not words, but glances, gestures, breath held and released. There is no chatter, no bravado. Only the rhythm of hands preparing for another night's work, loading flares, checking ropes, whispering numbers. They are the Nakthekson, the Night Witches, women of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment of the Soviet Air Force. Before you drift off, if quiet stories like this belong in your evenings, you might subscribe, not out of habit, but to keep these soft corridors of history open. And if you have a moment, tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers for you. The frost on the grass, the match's brief face, the cloth that answers the wind. Now, let the noise of today fold itself away. Let the cold become clarity, the dark become distance, the distance become calm. The field waits. The wings breathe. The night leans close. You're listening to echoes of war. The wind carries a thread of frost. You're standing at the edge of a field that isn't quite dark and isn't quite dawn, a thin blue hour where the sky forgets its color. Grass beads with silver breath. Somewhere far off, a river moves like a whispered thought. The air smells of cold oil and canvas, of damp earth and the patient weight of winter. The shapes in front of you are small, wooden ribs, fabric skins, wings that look like pages torn from a book and stitched back together. Their struts glow dully in the half-light. You lay a hand on one and feel the hush of a sleeping bird, timber cool as a church pew, metal fittings that hold the memory of night. Wind slides under the cloth and the cloth replies, a soft pulse like a held note. You listen. No engines yet. Only the ticking of cooled cylinders contracting, the tiny creak of rope and rib, the slow rhythm of your own breathing. Above you, clouds drift like smoke faded to ash. The horizon is a seam, needle-fine, threading east to west. Somewhere beyond it, men are drawing lines on maps they will never touch. Somewhere beneath it, roads hold the straight backs of soldiers who have forgotten their first names. Here, on this margin of field and sky, the war becomes a quieter animal. You taste iron at the back of your mouth, the taste of keys and coins, of tools, of a spanner biting home. You taste the air's thin glass, the way winter turns breath into a visible truth. Your gloves carry the smell of fuel, warm and sharp, a promise that will not be loud for long. The wind is restless but gentle, brushing the grass as if turning pages it wants to remember. A moth kisses the lamp glass and vanishes. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then thinks better of it. The night isn't empty. It's thick with unlit intentions. Footsteps move softly over wood planks, measured, unhurried, practiced. A match invents a face and then lets it fall back into shadow. Canvas rustles. A harness buckle taps a brief, metallic syllable. The earth receives a heel and gives it back. You imagine the path the planes will take. A long, patient climb into the dark, engines paired to a whisper, then a glide, as if the sky were a lake and the wings were skates, writing names the world will never read. The field is a stage for small miracles. A hand finds a knot by feel alone. A scarf is tied with the care of a letter sealed at the edge. A map folds to the size of a palm. No applause. No spotlight. Just the steady discipline of those who have learned to make almost nothing into enough. The wood will flex. The cloth will sing. The air will make a narrow road where no road should be. And the night will let them pass, because the night understands quiet. You stand still and let your eyes learn to see in shades of graphite. The barn becomes a low hill. The hill becomes a shoulder. The shoulder becomes a wing. The horizon leans forward, listening. Somewhere ahead, towns are sleeping with their mouths open, chimneys breathing, windows shuttered against the idea of grief. Somewhere ahead, trains are counting their axles in their sleep. Somewhere ahead, a bell is waiting for a hand that will never touch it. The first cough of an engine is not a sound so much as the memory of one, a curled, tentative breath that tests the cold, and the cold agrees. Then another. Then silence again, like a thought reconsidered. The propeller turns the air into water and the water into thread, and thread, pulled taut, can carry a great weight if you trust it. Trust is the trick here. Trust the wood, the cloth, the mathematics of lift written in a barely audible script. Trust the night to hold you when you lift your feet from the ground. You can feel the future condensing, bead by bead, along the wing's leading edge. You can feel the way names become call signs, and call signs become the kind of truth that doesn't require a voice. A hand squeezes another hand once. The ritual is a small one and therefore strong. Knuckles tap a fuselage twice. Not superstition, exactly, but a greeting. You look up. The stars are careful tonight. Not too many, not too bright, as if they've dimmed themselves out of respect. Chapter 1. Wings of Dust and Frost. The Steppe at Night. The steppe is endless, but the night makes it small. A black sea of grass, broken only by the pale ribs of birch trees and the ghostly glint of frost. The moon is a faint coin, half spent. Wind slides across the plain in long, careful sighs. Somewhere, a fox stops and listens, a silence so deep it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. You're standing near a rough strip of frozen ground, too narrow to be called a runway. Its edges are marked by lamps hidden under tin cups, their light leaking sideways, dim and secretive. Beyond them, shadowed silhouettes of biplanes sit crouched, Polycarpov P2s, patched and scarred, each one a fragile miracle of cloth and wood. They look less like machines and more like relics of flight's first dream. The pilots are young, younger than their war. 19, maybe 20. Their faces are pale ovals under wool caps, cheeks chapped by the wind. They move with quiet purpose, like people who've forgotten how to be afraid. One adjusts her gloves with the same care another might fold a prayer. Another runs her fingers over the wooden frame, tracing bullet scars as if reading Braille. They speak softly, barely above the wind. They are the Nachthexen, the night witches. Their name was given by the Germans who feared them, because when the engines cut and the planes glided low, the sound they made was like a broom through the dark. Soft, swift, death carried by air and silence. Machines made of memory. Each P2 is a contradiction. Too slow to race a storm, too fragile to fight a dogfight, yet perfectly tuned for the night's invisible war. Wings of linen stretched over wood. A cockpit open to the cold. No radio, no armor, no luxuries, not even parachutes in the early days. Just a map, a compass, a bomb rack bolted to the side, and trust in one another. The engines cough awake one by one, small radial hearts stuttering against the frost. Flames lick briefly from the exhaust, orange and fleeting. The air tastes of fuel and winter. Ground crews, many of them women too, move like ghosts, tightening straps, checking gauges, then stepping back with a nod that says more than words. A pilot pulls her scarf tighter. Another adjusts her goggles. The planes begin to move, thin wheels bumping over ruts and snowdrifts. You can hear the creak of wood, the shuffle of boots, the thin hum that grows into a pulse. One by one they take to the air, short runs, brief climbs, like birds startled from the same branch. The sky accepts them reluctantly. Engines drone low, their sound dissolving into the night. Then, nothing. The silence that follows is the truest sound of their mission. Once near the target, they cut their engines and glide. Through starlight, through fear, through the thin cold skin of the world. Below them, sleeping soldiers, glowing cigarettes, the geometry of war, tents, trucks, fuel depots, bridges. Above them, only stars, merciless and still. The bombs they carry are small, but precision makes them deadly. 2 or 3 per run. Over and over, night after night. More than 30,000 missions before the war ends. Wood and cloth against iron and fire, and somehow the cloth endures. The weight of air. From below, the German sentries hear a whisper, a soft hiss of canvas, a murmur like air drawn through teeth. They look up into nothing. Then the first explosion. Then another. The witches have passed. By the time the lights flash, the sky is empty again. Fear spreads faster than shrapnel. They say the witches see in the dark, that their eyes glow, that they can fly without sound because they ride the wind itself. Superstition blooms where logic fails, and logic fails often in war. But the truth is simpler and more haunting. They have no radar, no night vision instruments, just courage, discipline, and memory. They fly by the map written in their minds, by the faint glimmer of rivers and roads, by intuition honed through exhaustion. When their planes return, the dawn is often gray and brittle. Their hands are too cold to unclasp from the controls. The frost on their goggles forms tiny galaxies. The oil on their gloves freezes in streaks like veins of black glass. They land one by one, wheels biting the frozen soil. Mechanics run to meet them, guiding them home through the fog. Some smile, some don't. There's no time for celebration. The next sortie waits. They will sleep in the barracks for a few hours. Wooden bunks, wool blankets that never quite lose the smell of smoke and fuel. They will eat bread hard as frost, drink tea that tastes faintly of metal. Then they will rise again. And when night falls, the same ritual begins anew. Load, check, fly, glide. A routine so precise it becomes prayer. Letters never sent. In a corner of the airfield, there's a wooden crate filled with letters that will never be mailed. Some written to parents in faraway villages, some to lovers who will never read them, some to no one in particular, just paper absorbing the things that must be said to survive. One letter reads, "We fly low because we must. We are close enough to see faces before the bombs fall, but far enough to become ghosts before the dust rises." Another, shorter still, "If I do not return, tell the sky I was not afraid of it." You can imagine their handwriting, small, steady, practical, ink smudged by wind, by trembling fingers, by snow that found its way through canvas seams. The paper smells faintly of grease and candle soot. It belongs more to the air than to the ground. When the regiment is awarded the title Guards, it comes with new respect, new attention. But the women remain the same, overworked, underfed, and unyielding. They repair their own aircraft, drag bombs through mud, and fly without complaint. They do not chase glory. They chase completion, of the night, of the mission, of survival. And when they return, it is never with celebration, but with a quiet relief that hums through the camp like a shared heartbeat. The night thickens. The engines sleep again. Snow begins to fall, slow, patient, like ashes returning home. Somewhere in the dark, a pilot writes in her notebook, "The stars are kind tonight. They look like landing lights." The paper bends under her pen, the ink bleeds slightly at the edge. She closes it, tucks it into her pocket, and lies down with her boots still on. Outside, the wind shifts, a soft sigh over wings of dust and frost. Tomorrow, the sky will call again, and they will answer. Chapter 2. The Training of Shadows. where courage is measured in silence. You begin not in the air, but in a place that smells of kerosene, sweat, and chalk. The year is 1941. The Soviet Union bleeds at its borders. Villages burn like lanterns turned inside out. The world is unraveling, thread by thread, and in a small corner of it, near Engels, a group of young women report for duty. They come from cities and farms, schools and theaters, hospitals and factories. Some are students who once recited Pushkin, others drove tractors or worked in post offices. Many have never seen a cockpit up close. Yet each carries the same fire behind her ribs, that stubborn belief that even in ruin there is work to be done. They arrive carrying suitcases of modest dreams, worn gloves, a notebook, a photograph, sometimes a single bar of soap wrapped in paper. They expect hardship. They do not expect to be laughed at. But the men who meet them at the gates of the training camp grin like it's a cruel joke. Little girls, someone mutters. They'll last a week. They do not last a week. They last the war. The making of pilots. The camp sits on the flat belly of the steppe, wooden huts, a hangar that groans in the wind, and endless cold. The air bites even at noon. Inside, the walls are thin, plastered with frost. The women learn quickly, not because it's easy, but because failure is unthinkable. They march. They drill. They take apart engines until their fingers split. They study navigation by candlelight, tracing routes across maps that tremble in the draft. They sleep 4 hours a night, sometimes less. When the alarm sounds, they rise like a single breath. Flying is both science and faith. They learn the weight of wings, the pull of gravity's hand, the thin mercy of lift. They practice takeoffs until their bodies remember what their minds cannot. They fly two trainers that shudder in crosswinds, landing on strips so short they feel like afterthoughts. And always, the wind. It roars in their ears, bites their skin raw, fills their mouths with a taste of distance. At first, some cry in the cold. Then they stop crying. The tears freeze before they fall anyway. They learn to fix what breaks, to sew torn fabric, patch bullet holes, tighten cables with their bare hands. They become mechanics, engineers, navigators, leaders. No one calls them little girls anymore. Marina's compass. One of them, Marina Raskova, had already made her name in the sky. A record-setting aviator, a hero of the Soviet Union, she was called the Soviet Amelia Earhart. But she did not stay in safety. When war came, she went to Stalin himself, demanding permission to form an all-female regiment. She spoke quietly, but with iron in her words. 3 regiments were born from her petition: the 586th Fighters, the 587th Bombers, and the 588th, the Night Witches. Raskova was their compass. Her voice carried through the barracks, calm and deliberate. She taught them that precision was courage, that discipline was freedom. When they faltered, she reminded them, the air does not forgive arrogance. It listens only to respect. She trained them not just to fly, but to listen, to the machine, to the wind, to themselves. Many worshipped her. Some feared her. All followed her. But even the compass can be lost. In 1943, Raskova's plane crashed in bad weather. She died as she lived, in the air. When her coffin was carried through Moscow, tens of thousands lined the streets. The Night Witches flew overhead in formation, their engines low and grieving. From that day on, every takeoff was a silent salute. Between earth and sky. Training ends not with a ceremony, but with a storm. Snow falls in sheets so thick it erases the world. The airfield disappears under white silence. Yet the order comes: deploy to the front. Engines struggle awake. The women pack what they can: letters, scarves, a handful of bread, and climb aboard trucks that lurch through the snow. Their breath fogs the windows. The sky above them glows faintly with artillery flashes, distant and unreal. They reach their new base near the front lines, a clearing carved out of frozen soil, ringed by skeletal trees. No hangars, no lights, just frost, canvas, and determination. They dig their own shelters, build their own huts, clear the field of stones by hand. The first night, the wind howls through the cracks like an animal searching for warmth. The cold is a teacher too, cruel but honest. It strips away everything unnecessary. The next evening, they take off for their first mission. Engines whining, wings trembling, hearts steady. From now on, their classroom is the night itself. Lessons the sky keeps. There are things no manual teaches. How to tell distance by the shape of shadows. How to fly low enough to feel the heat of enemy searchlights on your face. How to listen to your navigator's breath to know when she's afraid. They learn these lessons in silence. One flight ends with an engine stalling midair. The pilot glides over black forest, praying the trees will part just enough. They don't. Another lands short of the field, the plane tipping nose, first into snow, soft as a shroud. They dig the wreck out with numb hands, laughing so they won't cry. Loss becomes a language, and they speak it fluently. But so does endurance. When a comrade doesn't return, someone hangs her scarf on the barracks wall. When the mission list grows thin, they volunteer before being asked. Each name scratched off is replaced by another who steps forward. The regiment begins to build a legend, not from victories, but from persistence. They are invisible by day, relentless by night. Their enemies curse them, invent stories to explain them, and in doing so, feed the myth. The wind returns each evening, faithful as hunger. Engines start, then die, then start again. The sky grows accustomed to their sound, the earth to their absence. Some nights, when the missions run late, they see the dawn rising over the steppe, a grey fire spreading across frost. In that light, their planes look almost translucent, like bones held to the sun. They are tired beyond words. They are alive beyond belief. One by one, the planes lift again into the dark, small and sure. The war still stretches ahead, wide as the horizon, cruel as the cold. But the night witches have learned the truth the steppe has always known. You don't conquer the sky. You learn to belong to it. Chapter 3. The First Raids. The sound of feathers burning. The first night they fly into enemy territory. The moon is a sickle of brass, and the air smells of snow about to fall. The ground crew stands in a loose half-circle around the planes, boots buried in frost. They don't speak much. There's no ceremony, just nods, gloved hands tightening straps, quiet checks of bomb fuses, a scarf knotted against the throat. You're standing a few steps back, close enough to feel the prop wash ripple against your coat. The engines cough awake, 2 at first, then 5, then all of them. A shiver runs through the airfield. The sound is small, not a roar but a heartbeat multiplied, the fragile rhythm of persistence. A flare arcs high, blooming into pale light that makes the frost glitter. Then the first purr. 2 rolls forward. The pilot keeps her hand steady on the throttle, her eyes fixed ahead where the dark is deepest. The little plane gathers speed, rattles, bumps, and finally lifts, a sigh made visible. One after another, they follow, tails lifting, wheels shedding snow. Soon the sky is full of invisible wings. Engines hum low, then vanish. The night takes them in. The women fly in pairs, pilot and navigator, over forests black as ink, rivers frozen to glass. They keep low to the ground to avoid radar, trusting instinct more than compass. Beneath them, faint lines of light mark roads and trenches. Somewhere ahead, the target, an ammunition depot near the dawn. It feels impossible that these fragile machines could hold so much intent. Yet inside each, the air vibrates with quiet determination, and something else softer. Wonder, perhaps, that they are really here in the sky at war. They climb, then glide. The wind smooths the noise away until only silence remains. And then, the first whisper of bombs falling, soft as feathers burning. The name the enemy gave them. On the ground, German soldiers hear it first as a breath against the treetops, a hissing, sighing sound, like the broom of a witch sweeping the night. They look up, eyes wide, but the sky is empty. Then the explosions come, sudden and precise, tearing holes in the dark. Panic spreads faster than reason. They shout, stumble, fumble with rifles. Searchlights swing through the blackness, slicing cones of pale light that find nothing. By the time they lock onto a silhouette, the plane has already banked, cut its engine, vanished again. Later, in reports and fearful rumors, they will give these women their name, Nachtthexen, the Night Witches, a name born from terror and awe, and a grudging respect. Because how could something so small, so slow, so seemingly fragile, strike with such precision, night after night, and disappear like smoke? The soldiers will say the witches fly on brooms, that they see in the dark, that bullets pass through them like ghosts. The truth is simpler, and far more haunting. The witches fly on courage and calculation. They see in the dark because they've spent half their lives inside it. And bullets don't miss them because of magic, but because they fly so low, so slow, the aiming instincts of gunners fail. The nickname sticks. They wear it like armor. Olga's fire. Somewhere in the formation, Olga and her navigator Yevdokia share a cockpit barely wide enough for two shoulders. The altimeter flickers faintly. The engine sputters like a smoker's cough. Frost has crept along the edges of their goggles. Olga checks the time. 2 minutes to target. She nudges the control stick, gliding lower. The wind finds every gap in her coat, sharp as glass. Yevdokia leans forward, eyes scanning the ground. She spots the dark cluster of warehouses, the faint glow of trucks unloading munitions. "Now," she says, and the word vanishes in the slipstream. Olga cuts the engine. The sudden silence is enormous. The plane becomes a whisper. Below, she can hear the faint crackle of fire, the clank of metal, even voices carried up through the cold. She releases the bombs. A heartbeat later, light blooms, orange and terrible, reflected in her goggles. She doesn't linger to watch. The plane banks hard, the wind howling through struts and wire. For a moment, gravity and grace share the same breath. Tracer fire claws at the dark behind them, wild, panicked. Bullets snap through air and nothing else. They vanish into the night, wings trembling but whole. When they return, the airfield is waiting in silence. Engines sputter to rest. The crew moves in slow, deliberate gestures, checking damage, refueling, reloading. Someone hands Olga a cup of tea so strong it tastes of smoke. She nods once, then goes to help the next crew prep their plane. There will be no celebration tonight, only continuation. The rhythm of fear. The raids become a rhythm. Take off, climb, silence, glide, return. The hours blur, the sky becomes routine. Each night is a test of patience and nerve. The planes are easy targets for flak, if seen, so they never fly straight, never twice the same way. They weave through darkness like sewing needles, stitching confusion into the enemy's map. Sometimes they are hit. Sometimes they don't come back. One night, a plane is struck over the Kuban. The fabric catches fire instantly, orange ribbons curling through black air. The pilot stays at the controls long enough to steer clear of the others, her last act a gesture of protection. When her plane falls, it leaves no sound but a sigh the wind carries for miles. The others fly on. They must. They return with eyes rimmed red, with frost in their hair, with silence in their bones. But they return. And soon something shifts, imperceptible at first. The fear that once clenched their chests becomes a kind of focus. They no longer wait for luck. They make it, one flight at a time. What the night remembers. By spring, the night witches have flown hundreds of missions. Their base smells perpetually of oil, smoke, and wet wool. The air is never still, always humming with repairs, with laughter that sounds like defiance, with the occasional curse when an engine refuses to start. At dusk, they gather for briefings under a canvas tent. The light flickers from a single bulb, swaying like a heart. Maps are unrolled, targets assigned. Some missions are close, others stretch far beyond comfort. No one asks why. The question is too big, the answer too simple. Because someone must. Before takeoff, they share small rituals. One ties a piece of red ribbon to her control stick. Another slips a pebble from home into her pocket. A third whispers to the plane, a conversation only the night can hear. Then, one by one, the engines cough awake. The ground shivers. And the darkness opens its arms once more. They climb into the same sky that has swallowed so many, yet still feels vast enough for faith. They follow rivers and railways, tracing the world by touch and instinct. When the moon hides, they navigate by memory alone. Each flight leaves a mark, invisible to the world but carved into the air. The night remembers every path they take, every heartbeat spent between light and shadow. By the time the sun rises, frost clings to their lashes like tears that never fell. The barracks are quiet except for the sound of boots thawing by the stove. Someone hums a lullaby, low and cracked, a song from before the war. Outside, the sky blushes faintly with dawn. The planes rest under blankets of frost, wings glistening as if dusted with ash. They look small again, too small for what they've done. But if you stand close, you can feel something in the air, a tremor that doesn't fade. The echo of flight, the hum of defiance, the quiet heartbeat of those who flew not to be seen, but to remind the night it was never empty. Chapter 4. Firelight over the steppe. The winter that wouldn't end. The wind never stops on the steppe. It crawls under doors, sleeps inside boots, gnaws at wood and bone alike. By December, it's less a weather and more a presence, something you live beside, like hunger or memory. The airfield lies half buried in snow, a patchwork of frozen mud and canvas. Tents sag under frost. Engines refuse to start until they're coaxed back to life with fires built from broken crates. Everything smells faintly of smoke and fatigue. You stand near the hangar that isn't really a hangar, just tarps stitched together and propped by willpower. Inside, the planes sleep like tired animals, their wings lined with frost, their wheels half frozen into the ground. Mechanics work with bare hands despite the cold, breath steaming in pale ghosts. The women move through it all with a kind of stubborn grace. Their cheeks are red, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, hair stiff with cold. They laugh often, maybe because not laughing feels too close to surrender. There are no days anymore, only cycles of dark and dim. They measure time in sorties, not sunsets. When dawn comes, it's grey and reluctant, light filtered through smoke, not sky. They eat soup that tastes mostly of water. They sleep where they fall. And at dusk, when the lamps are lit and the frost glows faintly blue, the field begins to hum again. Another night, another climb into nothing. Sparks in the dark. The enemy has learned by now. Searchlights guard every depot. Anti-aircraft guns trace invisible fences in the sky. Still, the night witches fly. The Pertus are too slow to escape fire, but that slowness becomes an advantage. The guns are calibrated for faster targets. The shells explode too soon, bursts of flame lighting the sky in brief. Terrible beauty. From the cockpit, it looks like flying through constellations that want you dead. Sometimes the light catches on the frost along the wings, turning them gold for a heartbeat. The pilots call it firelight over the steppe, that strange, almost holy glow before the world remembers what it is. Below, explosions ripple across enemy lines. Bridges crumble. Fuel trucks burn in neat rows. The night smells of cordite and scorched snow. Each mission is short, brutal, and precise. Drop, dive, disappear. Repeat until the sky forgets what quiet means. When they land, the airfield feels different. Charged, trembling, alive. Someone hands around a flask. Someone else starts to sing, voice cracked but steady. For a few minutes, warmth returns in laughter and smoke. Then the cold takes it back. The shadow of loss. One night, Kotia doesn't return. Her plane was last seen banking low over a ravine near Rostov, fire trailing from the engine. The radio is silent. The sky, indifferent. They search the next morning, if it can be called morning, wading through snow and silence. They find nothing. Not even wreckage. Just a single glove caught on a branch, stiff with frost. Back at camp, no one says her name for 3 days. Then, one evening, someone ties a length of red ribbon to the barracks door. No words. No ceremony. Just color against white. That night, the wind changes direction. It carries her memory across the field like a song without a singer. The next flight feels heavier. Not from fear, from absence. Every empty bunk becomes a shadow they carry into the sky. Yet they keep flying, because to stop would be to admit the loss matters more than the mission. And in war, grief must fly alongside you, never behind. Letters from nowhere. When the weather grounds them, the barracks become a hive of quiet rituals. They write letters that will never reach anyone. They mend gloves, polish boots, argue softly about poems. Some have started keeping diaries, though they'll never call them that. Notes, they say. Just notes. The entries are short, factual, stubbornly alive. January 12th. Fuel frozen again. Took off with one engine coughing. Saw dawn over the river, pink like blood diluted with milk. January 14th. Dropped bombs blind through fog. Navigator swore she could smell the city before she saw it. January 15th. Lost Kotia. Ribbon still on door. In one corner, a small fire crackles. Its light makes the frost sparkle, turns faces soft and golden for a while. Someone tells a joke about how the Germans must think they're witches indeed. Who else would dare fight winter itself? The laughter doesn't last long, but it doesn't need to. It's proof of life. The return of spring. By March, the snow begins to retreat, leaving behind mud and broken earth. The air smells faintly of thaw and gunpowder. Birds return, cautious, silent, as if testing whether the sky is safe again. The missions grow longer now, their targets farther west. The front is moving, inch by inch. Each flight feels like pushing against the edge of a great frozen tide. New pilots arrive, replacements for those lost or too injured to continue. They look impossibly young. The veterans teach them with a gentleness that comes from fatigue, not patience. The airfield hums with purpose again. Engines cough, propellers blur, maps unfold. The war feels endless, but motion itself is victory. One night, the sunset is clear for the first time in months. The steppe glows copper. The planes rest in long shadows, wings outstretched like weary arms. The pilots sit in silence, watching the horizon. No one speaks of peace, only of flight, of the next night's target, of who will take the dawn shift. The first stars appear, faint and kind. Someone murmurs a line from a poem. We are the wind's daughters. We carry light into dark places. The others nod. They understand. The night falls slow, generous, forgiving. Engines start again. Small fires reborn. The planes rise one after another, trailing sparks from their exhausts like shooting stars. The sky swallows them whole, but not without remembering. For every trail of flame, every breath held between silence and storm, the night keeps a record. And if you listen closely, long after the last engine fades, you might still hear it, that faint, fluttering sound like pages turning in the dark. Firelight over the steppe, the sound of courage written in air. Chapter 5. Under Enemy Eyes. The enemy awakens. By the summer of 1943, the darkness is no longer their ally. It's a hunted space. The Germans have learned. They have begun to watch the sky the way wolves watch the forest edge, patient, silent, certain that prey must return. Searchlights now guard every crossroads. Flak batteries line the rivers. Fighter patrols sweep the night in pairs, engines prowling for sound. The night witches know they are expected now. Their paths, once invisible, have become predictable. So they change the rhythm. They fly in threes instead of pairs. Two planes draw fire. The third dives low, silent, unseen. They trade altitudes, swap routes, scatter chaff, thin strips of foil that shimmer like snow to confuse radar. Their survival becomes a choreography. Danger measured in seconds, escape in instinct. Still, the risk multiplies. Every flight is a dialogue between luck and skill. Every takeoff, a negotiation with death. You can feel it in the airfield's new silence. Not fear, but awareness. The kind of quiet that exists only when every breath has learned its own fragility. The trap over the Kuban. It happens in the south, over the Kuban bridgehead, a night so clear the stars seem sharpened. 3 planes leave the base after midnight, carrying small loads, 2 bombs each, destined for a supply convoy rumored to be moving at dawn. They fly low, following the serpentine gleam of a river. The air is cold enough to sting tears into their eyes. Halfway to the target, the sky erupts. Searchlights snap open like eyes. Beams cross and tangle, their light thick as wire. Tracer fire stitches upward. The first purr, 2 jerks sideways, hit. It tumbles, one wing aflame, spinning slow and silent until it disappears behind a hill. The second banks hard, climbing, drawing the fire. The third cuts its engine, dives for shadow. 4:30 eternal seconds, there is nothing but wind. Then, the second plane's bombs drop true. The convoy below ignites, turning the valley into a mirror of flame. The surviving pilot, Lilia Litviak, pulls away, eyes raw, lungs burning. Her navigator whispers something, a name, a prayer, maybe both. Back at the airfield, only one plane returns. They stand around it in the pale light before dawn, faces hollow. No one cries. No one speaks. Someone writes the names on the blackboard by the mess tent, wipes away yesterday's weather notes to make room. War measures its progress in absence. Under watchful skies. After Kuban, the raids become a contest of patience. The Germans set traps, fake depots, false roads, dummy lights. They build decoys meant to lure the night witches into empty fields, waiting flak. The women adapt again. They fly lower, slower, stranger. They study the shapes of shadows, the way real buildings cast softer edges than painted ones. They learn to recognize the geometry of deceit. Some nights, they glide so close to the ground the frost from their propellers settles on the grass. They can smell the smoke from soldiers' cigarettes below. They can hear the bark of dogs. It's a kind of intimacy, this war fought in whispers and glimpses. They have become part of the night's language, half-seen syllables carried on the wind. When dawn comes, they land with mud spattered on their boots, with eyes bloodshot, with hands shaking too badly to unbuckle harnesses. And yet, before breakfast, someone always laughs. Not out of joy, out of defiance. Because laughter is still flight, just without wings. The navigator's art. If the pilot is the body, the navigator is the soul. She reads the land as if it were scripture. Rivers, spires, railway lines, all written in a secret alphabet of distance and angle. She must know, at any moment, where the invisible lies. Inside the cockpit, the cold is absolute. Breath crystallizes in seconds. The instruments fog. The compass needle quivers. The navigator leans over her map, tracing lines with a gloved finger that's lost all feeling. A good navigator doesn't need to see. She remembers the land, its texture, its scent, the rhythm of the engine over certain fields. Sometimes, when clouds swallow everything, she closes her eyes and listens. The tone of the propeller changes when they pass a river. The sound deepens over forest. Her ears replace her eyes. In those moments, faith becomes mathematics. They fly blind and land by miracle, though they never call it that. They call it discipline. And when the mission ends, they fold their maps like letters, tuck them into pockets, and write nothing down. Because memory itself has become classified. The weight of glory. By now, their fame has spread across fronts and languages. Enemy reports speak of night phantoms. Soviet newspapers praise their heroism, printing names that sound almost mythical. But glory is a heavy uniform to wear. At the airfield, there are no medals, only frostbite. No parades, only sleepless eyes and broken engines. Still, letters from home begin to arrive, addressed to the witches. Children write in crooked handwriting. Dear witches, I heard you fly faster than owls. Dear witches, please bomb the Germans who took my father. The letters are pinned to the barracks wall. They flutter when the door opens, soft wings of paper echoing the planes outside. And sometimes, before takeoff, one of the pilots touches a letter lightly, as if asking for luck. The night accepts their request. The war is changing now. The front moves west. Every victory costs a little more of what they have left. But the sky still opens for them. Even under enemy eyes, even when the searchlights bloom like white flowers, they keep rising. You can hear it, if you listen long enough, the rhythm of engines cutting through distance, the brief pause of silence before a glide, the faint hiss of cloth against air. The enemy watches, the guns roar, the night burns, and yet, somehow, they keep flying. Their wings are threadbare, their bodies thin, their hearts enormous. They have become what the war could not have imagined. The softest hands delivering the hardest blows. The quietest voices shaping the loudest echoes. And as dawn breaks, pink, merciful, exhausted, the world below begins to believe again in impossible things. Chapter 6. Between Fire and Frost. The long middle. There is a season in war that has no name. Not the beginning, when shock is a kind of clarity. Not the end, imagined like a distant shore. It is the long middle, where days repeat until they erase their edges and purpose must be chosen, not felt. You are inside it now. The airfield is mud braided with ice, a tapestry of ruts that remembers every wheel. The tents breathe in and out with the wind, canvas lungs asking patient questions. Stoves tick and sigh, offering heat no bigger than a hand. The ground crews move with a practiced slowness that saves strength. Lift, secure, check, and check again. A rag stiff with fuel becomes a flag of persistence on a nail. The women wear their fatigue like a second coat. It fits too well to remove. When they smile, it's with the eyes. When they laugh, it happens close to the chest, as if not to spill anything needed later. They do not talk of victory. They talk in units of flight. 3 sorties, good wind, bad searchlights, engine 5 is sulking again. Between fire and frost, endurance becomes a craft. At dusk, the sky takes on the color of worn copper. Somewhere far off, the front mutters to itself in distant artillery. The Partoos sit low to the earth, wings bandaged with tape the color of old bone, numbers flaking at the corners. If you listen, each plane keeps a tiny music under the skin, wire singing, fabric settling, wood answering weather with a faint, stubborn creak. A hand brushes frost from a leading edge. A pencil draws a line on a map that has been folded and refolded until it feels like cloth. A scarf is tied, not for style but for silence. The ritual is the point. The ritual is what keeps the world from coming apart. They lift again, thin silhouettes rising from a darker ground, and carry the middle of the war into the night. Fuel, bread, light. In the ledger of survival, 3 entries matter most: fuel, bread, light. Fuel is the first argument every morning. Barrels arrive late or not at all. A corporal with hands black as lacquer taps a list against the drumhead and calculates who flies now, who waits for a rumor to turn into a truck. Sometimes the fuel smells sweet, sometimes sour. Sometimes it carries the taste of distance, as if it already remembers where it will burn. Bread is second. The loaves are dense as tools. They break with a noise like old wood. Someone trades a pair of wool socks for an extra slice. Someone else saves her share for the navigator who cannot shake the chill from her hands. Tea is poured so strong it stains the spoon. Sugar is a holiday. Light is last, the rarest. A bulb strung over the briefing table swings and writes a slow circle on the maps. The bones of the women's faces are carved by it, cheekbones shallow as riverbeds in drought. They learn to read by darkness anyway, the tilt of a chin, the angle of a wrist, the way quiet gathers around a bad thought. Candles are hoarded, saved for worst weather and best news. When the sun does rise clear, once, twice a month, it feels like a mistake the world forgot to correct. For a few hours, the plains look almost young again. You can see the grain in the wood, the careful stitches in the fabric, fingerprints in old varnish. A mechanic runs her palm along a strut, the way a person might graze the bald head of a beloved statue for luck. In that light, you remember that machines, too, have biographies. Repairs you do with your heart. Night flying shreds aircraft the way winter shreds hands. There is always a cable that's too slack, a seam that puckers, a magneto with a superstitious temper. The workshop is a hymn to scarcity, tins of screws sorted by prayer, a bench made from the lid of a crate, a grease gun that works only if you flatter it first. They mend with the patience of tailors and the blunt force of carpenters. Needles as long as knives punch through linen with thunks you can feel in your elbow. A storm lantern throws a small wilderness of shadows over bent backs. Glue breathes its bitter perfume. The ribs of a wing are held together under heated clamps like a patient with splints. When the engine is opened, it looks like a small city cut from iron. Alleys of fins, courtyards of gears. Someone jokes it's a Moscow where nothing is late. Someone else replies that even Moscow's engines need to sleep. Names pass from mouth to mouth, not gossip but inventory. Nadia's rudder, Zena's prop, Reisa's cowling. Each repair carries a story scar. The planes learn them and keep them. When they fly as many lives at once. Hands that cut fabric, hands that tied knots, hands that tightened bolts until they felt like certainty. On a shelf above the workbench sits a tiny shrine without icons, a broken altimeter, a bent nail, the cap from a barrel of oil, 3 spent spark plugs. It is everything they have saved from becoming nothing. The things they don't say. Camaraderie is not loud here. It moves like groundwater, unseen but carrying whole fields on its back. There is the way boots appear by a bunk while the owner sleeps, sized right, dried, polished with the last clean corner of a rag. The way someone lingers at the stove a little longer, pretending not to notice she is warming another's hands by proxy. The way jokes are told in threes, gently, so even the tiredest will catch the third and feel included. There is the way news is carried, not shouted, never hoarded. A birth in a village 1,000 kilometers east becomes a candle in a storm. Word of a lost cousin is folded small, placed in a pocket with a stone to keep it from blowing away. And there is silence, the oldest language in the barracks. The silence after a name is read in morning orders and not heard at night. The silence when 2 return and the third does not. The silence that is not emptiness, but a full bowl set carefully on a grave you cannot find. No one says, "Be careful." It is already in the air, heavy as weather. Instead they say, "Mask secure, map dry, wake me if the wind turns." Love, when it appears, looks like a scarf shared on a gusty runway, like the last cigarette broken cleanly in half, like the hand that steadies your shoulder while you do not look down. The half-world at 200 meters. There is a particular altitude where the Earth is too close to trust and too far to help. 200 meters. A half-world. Here the Partus float between map and memory. Villages are necklaces of dim pearls. Rivers are tin knives in a velvet drawer. Forest is a thought you can enter and never leave. Searchlights comb this half-world now with furious tenderness. The cones bleed into one another like white rivers. The pilots read their edges the way a chess player reads danger, by the spaces not yet taken. Engines cut. The plane becomes a leaf in a breath. At this height, sound is a second pair of eyes. The navigator hears a change beneath the wings, a shallow hush that means water, a deeper hush that means field, a broken hush that means town. She presses a thumb to the map where the paper has gone thin from hope. "Here," she says, and the pilot trusts the word more than any instrument. They are instruments too, one tuned to listening, one tuned to response. Anti-air claws upward. The sky blooms white and red and then remembers it is black. The P2 shrugs at physics and moves through the spaces between. A bullet drills the fabric, a neat hole no bigger than a button. A hand reaches back mid-glide and covers it with tape as if pressing a bandage to a child's scraped knee. Below, men shout in a language the wind chews to pieces. The bombs lift their small arguments into the air and drop them carefully into fuel and timber and certainty. Then the engine returns, a living thing, and carries the two women home on its small, proud back. The altimeter breathes again. 200 becomes 100, becomes 50, becomes a wheel touching earth as lightly as a palm on a sleeping forehead. Midpoint. This is the midpoint of the war for them, not by calendar, but by feeling. They have flown enough to know what can kill them. They have survived enough to know what cannot. Exhaustion is a geography they could draw from memory. The low marsh of the hour before dawn, the high ridge after the second sortie, the dry riverbed at noon when the body goes on strike and the soul defaults to habit. Yet there is a grace to the middle. Beginnings are clumsy, endings heavy. The middle is where craft lives. The body and the machine have settled into a quiet agreement. I will carry you if you will carry me. Awards have come, guard titles, citations, the occasional star pinned with hands that do not understand how to be ceremonial. The letters from home have multiplied. A stack tied with string sits in a mess tin by the door. No one reads all of them at once. They are seeds for sterile days, medicine rationed to last. News moves along the front like a rumor with good shoes. Stalingrad, Kursk, places that are not yet stories but soon will be. The night witches do not fight those battles. They gnaw at the edges, worrying bridges and depots and nerves until the larger teeth can bite. It is not heroic the way legends imagine. It is more necessary than legend allows. Sometimes, in the hour most people use for sleeping, they step outside and let the sky look at them. Stars like the heads of nails press into the dark. A fox crosses the field as if late for an appointment. Breath rises, becomes history, disappears. Between fire and frost, they stand very still and remember they are alive. A day that breaks its pattern. Every so often, the war misplaces its rhythm and something like gentleness happens. Morning comes warm, a word they had forgotten the mouth could make. A truck arrives early with fuel and potatoes. The cook invents soup that tastes faintly of dill. A parcel is passed out. 2 ribbons, a bar of soap perfumed like a memory, 3 buttons with nothing to fasten. Laughter lifts the roof beam by a centimeter. Training flights are ordered for the new crew. The veterans sit on crates and watch the takeoffs with the quiet vanity of old professionals. Advice is doled like sugar, sparingly, without cruelty. Then an engine coughs the wrong way, and the day decides to be a day again. The training flight waddles home with its tail between its legs, and a seasoned pilot trades her brief rest for a wrench. By dusk, the warm morning has withdrawn its offer. Wind returns, a creditor. The mission board fills one column, then another. An airframe fails a test. A message arrives on damp paper. A supply dump has moved. The target moves with it. One of the veterans ties her hair with the new ribbon anyway. Small rebellions matter most when obedience is the only road. The candle and the compass. Night briefing. The chief lays a compass on the map, and the compass looks like a coin that has learned to point. Circles are drawn that cut villages in half and leave forests whole. The navigator for Crew 17 notes a curve where others see a line. "Wind 30 degrees cross," she says. Someone nods. A candle gutters on the table and flares back. An argument it keeps winning. Shadows of hands travel across the paper like birds. The word bridge is said without drama, the way you might say bread or boots, and yet the room leans toward it. When they step out, the cold has sharpened to glass. The planes wear rime along their ribs, glittering like a cheap necklace at a good party. The moon is a disciplined officer. The stars, enlisted men at attention. Engines. The first thrum is small and intimate, like a secret between two friends. The second makes it public. The third decides the question. By the fifth, the field has a pulse again. A hand closes over a compass with the tenderness of closing a child's book. Another hand tucks the candle end into a pocket. A superstition, a spare, a promise. They taxi. They rise. The ground remembers them and is grateful for the remembering. The return with nothing to say. There are nights after which words do not fit. The mission held, the bombs fell, the searchlights groped and failed. A line of flame walked a rail yard until it learned to run. The engine made a new noise at altitude and then forgot it. A flare drifted in an arc no one had predicted and painted each face for an instant with a softness not seen in months. They land into a wind that wants to keep them. Wheels kiss earth, then settle. The field rushes forward and then stops as if embarrassed by its eagerness. Back at the tent, tea is poured. The kettle makes a small applause against the iron. Boots come off with sounds like truth being told. No one asks, "How was it?" No one answers, "Fine." They accept being together as the only sentence the night requires. Someone writes 3 numbers in a notebook. Someone else draws a small square and darkens it in. A depot no longer there. The chief marks a map with a thumbprint that dries into a faint print of swirls. Bodies lean against canvas, and canvas leans back. One pilot stares at her gloved hands as if they belonged to a different century. When she finally speaks, it is to say, "Tomorrow's wind will be from the east." Everyone nods as if she has told a joke worth saving. The candle end comes out of a pocket and sits on a crate. No one lights it. It's enough to know it's there. A quiet image. Before sleep, she steps outside to breathe a private breath. The sky is a black field stitched with the thinnest thread of silver. Somewhere a horse moves in its sleep and becomes a shadow changing its mind. Frost has rimmed each blade of grass the way a patient hand rims a cup. The planes stand in a crooked row, tails to the wind, like animals that have agreed not to leave. She reaches out and presses her palm to the wing she flew. The fabric is cold, the wood underneath warmer by a whisper. For a moment, the skin of the plane and the skin of her hand do not know where one ends and the other begins. Far to the west, the front murmurs, a city speaking in its sleep. Between fire and frost, she closes her eyes and lets the night hold her upright. The candle on the crate does not burn. It glows anyway. Chapter 7. Crosswinds and Crossroads. The river that divides the world. The Dnieper is a wound stitched with ice. Wide, slow, and cruelly beautiful, the kind of river that remembers everything. On one side, the land they have bled to defend. On the other, the promise of return. To the west, to the lost towns, to the ghosts of familiar streets. By autumn, orders come down. Advance the regiment. A new base will be carved from mud and timber near the crossing, west of the river. The move takes days. Trucks crawl through thawing ruts. Planes leapfrog between rough strips, guided by hand flares and instinct. The wind changes scent. Smoke becomes damp soil, pine, and something like hope. You stand at the riverbank at dawn. The water moves like mercury under the first light, carrying branches, bottles, half-melted snow. A bridge, temporary, trembling, spans its breadth. The sound of boots and tires is steady, like a heartbeat refusing to die. On the far bank, artillery mutters somewhere unseen. The war has followed them west. But so has the sky. The gunner's sky. He is 20, maybe 21. A Luftwaffe gunner stationed near the front. His name doesn't matter, not because it's forgotten, but because it's the same as hundreds of others. He doesn't hate the witches. He fears them. Each night, they come without sound. He has learned to hear silence now, the moment when the forest holds its breath, when the night changes texture, when something unseen crosses the edge of comprehension. He sits at the flak gun, wrapped in a grey coat that smells of machine oil and regret. His hands are blistered. His eyes sting from the cold. The searchlights sweep the heavens like interrogators. "Do you hear it?" Someone whispers beside him. He shakes his head. Then he does. It's faint, a sigh, a shiver, the sound of cloth rubbing against air. He tightens his grip on the trigger. Tracer fire cuts upward, red threads sewing nothing. The light catches a glimpse, a shadow, a wing, the ghost of a plane made of thought. He fires again and again, until the barrels glow faintly orange. The sky remains silent. Then, from somewhere distant, a low bloom of sound, an explosion too precise to be chance. He closes his eyes. When he opens them, the stars have rearranged themselves. Later, in the morning, he will write to his sister. They call them night witches. But they are not witches. They are patients with wings. He folds the letter carefully, seals it, and leaves it on his cot. The mail truck never comes. Civilians of the night. A small Ukrainian village lies near the new base. Its houses lean like weary listeners. Its streets are more mud than path. The villagers have seen soldiers come and go for years, but never like these. At first, they watch from windows, unsure what to make of the women in flight suits. The sight of female pilots feels like a fairy tale told wrong. Then, slowly, trust grows, over shared bread, over borrowed tools, over laughter that bridges the gulf between fear and admiration. Old women bring buckets of milk. Children sneak to the airfield to touch the planes, whispering charms against bad weather. Someone carves a wooden sign, "The Witches' Field," and nails it to a birch post at the road's end. The nights become communal. When engines start, lamps flicker in windows. When planes return, lights flash twice, once for greeting, once for thanks. One evening, during a raid, stray shells fall near the village. Roofs collapse, animals panic, fire licks through straw and snow. The witches return at dawn, landing in fields still smouldering. They walk among the ruins quietly, helping pull debris, fetching water, patching walls. A child hands a pilot a single daisy pulled from frozen earth. The pilot tucks it into her flight jacket without a word. That night she flies again, the flower still pressed against her heart. The letter found in a tree. Weeks later, after a heavy bombardment, a scout finds something strange. Halfway up a birch near the river, a letter caught in the bark. Its paper is weathered, but the ink survives. To whoever finds this, we fly when the sky forgets how. Our wings are cloth, our engines cough, our hands are stiff as the river's edge. We are told the war will end soon. I do not believe it yet. But I believe in the night, and in the way it listens to us. If you read this, know that I was not afraid. The signature is only an initial, the letter N. They leave the letter there, pressed in the tree's skin. Some things belong to the wind more than to hands. Crosswinds. The new base is better, which is to say, less impossible. Runways are longer. Fuel arrives on time. There's even a radio tent now, its antenna swaying like a tall reed against the sky. But with the progress comes danger. The enemy's counterattacks intensify. Patrols circle nightly. Sometimes, flares turn night to false day for minutes at a time. Flying now is like threading a needle during an earthquake. Crosswinds over the Dnieper make takeoffs treacherous. The little planes bounce, shudder, threaten to overturn. More than one pilot breaks her ribs on the dashboard. Yet none ask for rest. They adjust, compensate, learn the new rhythm. One plane is hit on landing, its wing sheared off, the fuselage spinning like a coin. Both women crawl out, laughing breathlessly. "I told you," the navigator wheezes. "The wind just wanted a ride. The wind always wants a ride." Crossroads. As the front pushes westward, the regiment finds itself stretched thin, flying longer missions, supplying reconnaissance, even dropping food to partisans deep in forests. Every path now feels like a crossroad, which bridge to destroy, which convoy to risk, which life to save. War has 1,000 doors, and every one of them opens to another night. One mission takes them over a small town the enemy has occupied. The streets below are dark, except for a church still burning from the inside out. Through a gap in the roof, you can see the altar's gold glint in the firelight, beauty refusing to surrender completely. The pilot watches it for a heartbeat before banking away. Her navigator whispers, not to her, but to the air, "Maybe we are all just keeping the light from going out." The pilot nods. She doesn't trust words anymore, but she trusts flight. Two shadows, one sky. That winter, the regiment gains a strange ally, a squadron of male bomber pilots stationed at a nearby field. They exchange fuel for spare parts, stories for cigarettes. At first, the men are amused by the witches' ragged planes and small stature. Then they watch them land after missions, frostbitten, smiling, engines wheezing, and the amusement dissolves into respect. Sometimes, their paths cross in the air. Two silhouettes, vastly different, one heavy, one light, sharing the same moonlit corridor. From the ground, they look like twin stars in slow motion. Later, the men begin painting small white moons on their own planes, calling it the witch's luck. War has many languages. Reverence is one of them. The woman who refused to land. Her name was Totyana. During a mission west of Kiev, her engine took a direct hit. Fuel leaking, flames licking the fuselage. The order came through the crackling radio, "Land immediately." She didn't. Instead, she stayed aloft long enough for her navigator to drop the payload. The target, an ammunition train, went up in a roar that tore sound from the air. Only then did she attempt to land. The plane touched down in a frozen field, burning as it skidded. They pulled her from the wreckage alive, half conscious, skin blackened but eyes open. She lived 3 days. Her final words, "Don't waste wood on a coffin. The air already knows me." They buried her in the steppe, under frost and wind and silence. Her plane's propeller stands as her marker, a windmill of memory turning forever. The long walk home. Months later, when the front moves again, The night witches pack up once more. Engines wheeze, tires sink, ropes creak, the familiar chorus of departure. The river glitters behind them like a scar healing too slowly. They walk a while beside their planes before takeoff, boots sinking in thawed earth, eyes on the horizon. Every step west feels like reclaiming a heartbeat the war had stolen. When they finally rise, the landscape below seems to breathe differently. Fields green again, rivers full, villages stirring. Smoke from the front drifts farther now, thinner, uncertain of its place. They fly low over it all. Guardians, ghosts, witnesses. The sun climbs, hesitant but present. The wind moves around them, softer now, as if remembering old promises. And though the war still waits beyond the next hill, there's a whisper in the air tonight that wasn't there before. Something fragile, impossible, almost forgotten. It sounds like peace, rehearsing. Chapter 8. The Edge of Victory. The year that forgot to end. It is late 1944. The war has been dying for months, but refuses to lie still. Each dawn comes too early and too grey. Each night arrives late and too loud. You're standing near the new airfield in Poland, the mud still soft from yesterday's thaw. The plains are lined like bones along the horizon, patched, pitted, but faithful. The regiment has crossed the border now, chasing a war that runs ahead of them like an animal unwilling to be cornered. The air smells different here, heavier, sweeter, tinged with smoke and the ghost of burned fields. The ground trembles sometimes from artillery rolling east to west. The sky, once clean, is now a fever, yellow by day, bruised by night. The night witches fly more now than ever. The targets are closer, the enemy desperate, the missions endless. Bridges, railways, depots, retreating convoys. The same words, repeated like prayers that have lost their meaning. They no longer believe in luck, only in rhythm. Engines, maps, takeoffs, landings, each one a heartbeat in a body too tired to stop beating. They live on caffeine, courage, and something colder, momentum. The edge of victory feels nothing like triumph. It feels like frost in the lungs and fire under the ribs. The ruins they pass over. The West is a graveyard that keeps pretending to be a country. They fly low over towns without roofs, rivers full of wreckage, forests blackened to skeletons. Once, over the Vistula, they pass a column of refugees walking along a frozen road, thin figures dragging carts, wrapped in blankets the color of ash. The pilot looks down and sees a child waving a stick as if saluting. For a heartbeat, she considers dropping the emergency food packet tied behind her seat. Then she sees soldiers in the distance and decides against it. War teaches the difference between help and danger. Sometimes they are the same thing. At night, when the raids begin, the horizon flickers like a dying film reel. Towns vanish. Roads twist in new directions made by bombs. Even the rivers seem to change course. From above, the world has become a palimpsest, one story written over another until neither can be read. The navigator draws lines on her map, pencil trembling, then laughs quietly. Even the earth is tired of remembering where things used to be. The pilot says nothing. But when they land, she will keep the torn map folded in her pocket, proof that the world once had borders. Shadows over the Oder. By February, the regiment reaches the Oder River. The front has become a living storm. Columns of tanks crawl across the ice like insects. The night sky flashes with artillery, silent from this distance but endless in its pulse. The night witches are ordered to harass enemy crossings. They fly 6, sometimes 7 sorties a night, returning just long enough to refuel and reload. Their faces are hollowed by exhaustion. Their hands tremble too much to hold spoons. Still, they fly. The river below is a mirror of fire and ice. Searchlights crisscross it like blades. Tracer rounds climb, red and white, bursting into brief flowers before dying. They dive into it, not through bravery anymore, but because it's all they know how to do. The planes buck, rattle, scream. Holes open in fabric wings. One loses her engine mid-glide and crashes into the far bank. Another lands with one wheel gone, skidding sideways into the snow. Every night they return fewer. Every morning they stand for roll call, names swallowed by wind. And still, at dusk, the engines start again. It isn't courage now. It's gravity in reverse. The sky pulling them upward because the ground no longer knows what to do with them. The letter that was finally sent. Some nights, between flights, they write again. Not letters for delivery, just words for survival. One pilot, whose handwriting has grown shaky with fatigue, finally addresses her letter properly. Mama, the war is ending. We can feel it like a storm receding, though the thunder hasn't stopped. My hands are cracked, my face older than it should be. But I am still here. I have seen so many things fall, and still the night holds us up. When this is over, I will come home. If home remembers me. She folds it, slides it into her boot for safekeeping, and flies her next mission. Weeks later, when her plane is shot down over the Oder, the letter is found, half-burned, still legible. The paper smells of smoke and air. A mechanic will keep it in her coat pocket for the rest of the war. A fragment of someone else's promise becomes a compass for all of them. The night the wind turned red. April 15th, 1945. Their orders: fly west of Berlin. The enemy's lines are collapsing, but his claws are still sharp. The weather is treacherous, low clouds, crosswinds, the smell of rain that hasn't yet decided to fall. The pilots climb anyway, their planes staggering under heavy loads. Below, the land burns in 1,000 small places, barns, bridges, towns, the debris of retreat. The wind carries smoke and screams alike. When they cut their engines, the air is alive with echoes. They glide over a line of trees, drop their bombs on a column of fuel trucks, then bank sharply toward home. But the wind shifts. A sudden gust grabs the wings, flips one plane sideways. The pilot fights, corrects, dives. For a moment, everything steadies. Then anti-air bursts bloom like red flowers all around. She lands hours later with holes through both wings and blood on her sleeve. She laughs as she climbs down, saying simply, "The wind finally noticed us." That night, the regiment writes her name on the blackboard, but this time in chalk the color of rose ash. Berlin at the edge of sight. The horizon changes again. The glow is no longer just fire, but something else. A pulse of light that seems to come from within the earth. Berlin. They can see it now from altitude, the silhouette of a broken city, burning and black, its rivers molten, its avenues gone to dust. Even the stars above it seem dimmer, as if afraid to look too closely. Their missions now are brief, almost symbolic. Final strikes against resistance, supply lines, pockets of stubbornness. The Germans no longer believe they are human. The witches glide over the ruins like omens, the last sound the war will ever hear. Somewhere below, in a bunker, the man who began all this is preparing to end it. But the women do not know, and would not care if they did. Their war is with the night itself. They fly their last sorties through air thick with cinders. When they land, the dawn is silent, too silent. No orders. No targets. No sound but wind. They wait for hours, unsure what to do with stillness. It feels wrong, like a missing step on a staircase they've climbed too many times. Then, through the radio's static, a single voice. Cease operations. The war is over. No one cheers. No one speaks. The planes cool. The frost begins to melt on their wings, sliding down like tears. Aftermath. Victory doesn't arrive with trumpets, but with the slow sound of breathing returning to bodies that had forgotten how. The witches walk the airfield in the pale morning, touching wings, ropes, tools. Everything looks smaller now, as if the night had been keeping it large. They wash their hands in cold water and stare at the dirt swirling away. It feels indecent to be clean. Someone begins to hum. Another joins. The song isn't about war, or peace, or even flight. It's about rivers, about grass in spring, about walking barefoot in the dark without fear. For the first time in years, they hear birds. For the first time, the wind carries no orders. They remove the red ribbons from their cockpits and tie them to a single birch by the field's edge. The tree shivers as if waking from a long dream. The ribbons flutter like tongues of quiet fire. When they sleep that night, no engines wake them, and for the first time, the silence feels like mercy, not loss. A quiet image. Weeks later, the field is abandoned. Grass grows where tire tracks used to be. Rain washes the soot from the wings of the few planes left behind. A shepherd boy finds one in a meadow. Its propeller is broken, its cockpit filled with leaves. He climbs in, sits at the controls, and pretends to fly. From a distance, it looks like a child commanding the wind. But if you listen closely, you might hear something else. The faint creak of wood-remembering flight. The ghost of laughter carried in a gust. The hum of courage that never fully lands. The boy grows up. The plane rots. The field forgets its name. But on certain nights, when the wind comes from the east, the villagers still claim to hear a strange, soft sound drifting through the dark. The whisper of cloth against air. The echo of witches riding the night. Chapter 9. The Last Flight. The room where the wind waits. The museum is quiet in the morning, before footsteps and school groups, before the glass learns all the faces it will hold. You stand in a room washed with pale light. Dust floats like retired snow. The air is cool and smells faintly of wax, old paper, and metal that forgot its heat years ago. In the center, on narrow landing gear that seems too shy to carry history, rests a Polikarpov Per-2. Its fabric is new, but the stitches look like memory. Its ribs and spars are clean, but the wood still hums if you listen close enough. A tonic note, the pitch of persistence. A placard whispers facts that do not breathe. Span, weight, speed. A rope guides you where you may not touch. Beyond the rope, a small red ribbon is tied at the base of the control stick, a quiet defiance of curators and time. The ribbon's color has softened into something like dried cherries. It trembles when the air conditioning sighs, as if the room were remembering wind. A volunteer rolls a cart of folding chairs into the corner. He nods to you as if you belong. Perhaps you do. A sign by the door promises a talk at 10. Night witches. A pilot remembers. You sit. You wait. You think of frost and tarps, of lamps hidden under tin cups, of the breath of engines at dusk. You think of maps folded thin by hope. You think of night, not as darkness, but as a place that learned to listen. When she enters, she is smaller than the war. She walks with a stick, careful as a fox. Her coat is plain. Her eyes are not. They are the eyes of someone who has flown enough to know that the ground is the more dangerous country. She sits, inhales, and the room leans forward. Her voice is low and level, the kind of calm that occurs when terror has already been spent. There was no last flight, she says. There were only the flights that learned how to stop. Everyone smiles, then grows quiet again. You feel the museum change temperature by a thought or two. The story she keeps folded. She doesn't begin with dates. She begins with weather. The last winter was damp in the bones, she says, not the good dry cold that holds you together. We were west by then, river after river, airfields that only existed when we said so out loud. The audience writes nothing. They just keep what she says. She tells them about a night in April when the wind forgot its manners. Cross quarters over a strip cut from a farmer's field. Searchlights stitched into a net whose knots were shells. The smell of cordite and thawed manure. War's absurd grammar. She and her navigator lifted slow, then climbed inside a darkness that did not wish to share itself. The route was a geometry of risk learned by heart. 2 degrees left at the birch grove, shallow climb over the river that pretended to be sleep, glide when the mill road turns west. The target a rail junction coughing up men and ammunition together, as if the body and the bullet were kin. We cut the engine early, she says, because the night prefers secrets. In the steep quiet, she heard boots on ballast, the clank of a coupler, one man's laugh with too much fear in it to be mean. They dropped 2 small truths into the dark. Gravity's handwriting, precise and unadorned. The junction curled into fire. Tracer reached for them, bright syllables in a language that never meant well. The engine coughed back to life like an old ant insulted by the cold. They flew through the seam the searchlights left for those who respected the difference between arrogance and luck. We landed crooked and whole. Zoya kissed the wing. Ridiculous woman. I told her not to waste kisses. Then I touched it too. The room laughs softly, as if taught. Someone asks about fear. She shrugs. Fear is just a weather. You dress for it. The ones who stayed aloft. She is not sentimental. Her affection arrives like good bread, dense, useful, shared in equal slices. She speaks of the ground crews first. Hands black with oil that never quite washed out. Women who could listen to a hot engine and say what it wanted to confess. Men who learned to sew linen like tailors of bone. A mechanic who kept a shrine of broken altimeters and bent nails on a shelf. Proof that even failure serves when you ask it nicely. She lists names the way a navigator lists landmarks. Nadia with the tape that stuck even to weather. Anya who could find a draft in a closed room and chase it out with a joke. Marina, their compass, who died the way compasses live, pointing toward the thing that called. We owe the sky, she says simply, to those who never left the ground. Then the navigators. Souls with maps. Women who could read the earth by sound, who could tell water from forest by the timbre of the prop wash, who folded charts with a tenderness you reserve for letters from the dead. We kept no diaries, she says, but our hands learned the minutes by heart. She pauses. Her eyes drift to the Pertu. The plane forgave us more than once. The gunner's letter. They bring it out with the white gloves and the cautious posture of archivists who know paper can be a live thing. A letter, in German, stained and folded again and again. A translation sits beside it, typed, modest. They call them night witches. But they are not witches. They are patients with wings. The pilot nods when she sees the line. He understood more than most, she murmurs. Not kindly, not unkindly, simply true. She tells a story not from her cockpit, but from the other end of the gun. A night outside a town without a name anymore. A flak battery crewed by boys who had run out of summer. They fired until the barrels glowed, until the light from their own fury blinded them. One of the witches, not her, flew low, lower than doctrine, lower than superstition. She escaped on the grammar of angles alone. I like to believe the gunner kept both his eyes, the pilot says. We kept ours by not making a habit of thinking about theirs. The letter returns to its folder. Paper sleeps with the living. The village that lends its silence. She gestures with a small hand, and the volunteer dims the lights. A short film, the color of memory, sepia with the faint green of older truths. You see a village, Ukrainian or Polish, the way the earth writes when it is tired. Low houses, crooked fences, a birch too brave for its own good. A pull, two schemes low. Windows flicker awake, two pulses each. Greeting, gratitude. A woman in a headscarf lifts a bucket to the road and leaves it there. Tea, perhaps, or water, or bravado. Children hold hands, faces turned skyward, not in awe, in participation. The plane is a cousin, passing through. Then an image no camera caught, but the room agrees to imagine with her. A daisy, the last of its kind in a cold field, pressed into a pilot's palm by a child who could not have known what it means to offer flight a flower. I carried that daisy into Berlin, the pilot says. It was brown by then, but it had not forgotten how to be a daisy. The lights return carefully, as if they had been borrowed. The flight that learned how to stop. They ask about the end, of course. Endings take up too much room in the curious mind. She does not say victory. She says cessation the way a doctor says a pulse has steadied. The radio said stop, so we did. Later, we learned the reasons. But in the moment, there was just the wind, and it had nothing left to instruct. She tells of taxiing to a halt without the next sortie nested inside the current one, of stepping down and finding the earth too compliant, of hearing birds and not trusting them. The last flight, for her, was the one after the order, a ferry hop to a meadow that wanted its grass back. No bombs, no flares, no reasons, just altitude that belonged to no one and the sound of an engine at peace with itself. We turned the fuel off on downwind, she says, smiling. Let the plane remember gliding for pleasure. They landed into a hush that moved like a new animal through the field. They parked in a crooked row as if they had been designed to look that way when finally at rest. Someone tied the first ribbon to a birch. You never plan a last of anything, she says. It arrives the way rain does, inevitable only in retrospect. After flight. The room breathes with her. You can feel the audience want to ask about medals. She spares them the trouble. They pinned stars, she says. We pinned laundry. Both are signs. One is cleaner. There were parades, some. There were speeches by men who had not learned how to talk to silence. There were photographs of faces already moving away from the lens toward grocery lists and roofs that leaked and the strange task of sleeping through midnight. We married, some of us. We did not marry, some of us. We worked with our hands because they had never learned idleness. We taught our daughters to change tires and our sons to sew. We kept our maps. We lost our maps. Both choices were kindnesses. Letters arrived late, sometimes decades late, sometimes not at all. A scarf turned up in a parcel from a city that had changed its name 3 times. Some nights, the old engine note returned to the ears just before sleep and became a kindness rather than a summons. I grew small, she says, smiling at herself. The plane stayed the size it was. The archivist's box. After the talk, while the others queue for autographs on programs and guidebooks and a child's model kit, you drift to a side table where an archivist has placed a shallow grey box. Inside, fragments, a brass buckle greening at the edges, a pencil worn to the size of a thumb with a map's faint grid still smeared into its wood, a rectangle of linen patched twice, the stitches not neat but unable to fail, a compass that points faithfully to a north no one in this room will ever need to find. On top, a sleeve of plastic with an index card, ribbon, cockpit, red, provenance uncertain. You don't touch it. You let your eyes be the hands that know how to keep. The pilot stands beside you quietly. She looks at the ribbon and tilts her head. We tied them for the ones who did not land, she says, and for ourselves, so we remembered we had landed. Her hand hovers above the box, then withdraws. Some gestures you finish only in your mind. The walk to the door. It takes her a long time to cross the room, not because she is weak, because the past has learned how to pull, and she has learned how to let it without surrendering her direction. She stops by the part 2. The guard watches, then chooses to study the floor. The rope remains a line, not a wall. She leans close, as if to tell the wing a secret. Perhaps she does. A breath goes out of her that you can almost see, an exhale that has been rehearsing for 80 years. We thought we were very small, she says to the plane, to you, to the dust. We were correct. And we were enough. She laughs, the kind of laugh that has no sound but which modifies the air. At the door, she turns back once. The ribbon stirs without hands. Light lies along the upper wing like a benediction. A quiet image. Outside, late morning has decided to be kind. A breeze moves leaves in a language that requires no alphabet. Traffic murmurs, modern engines, civilized, domesticated, none of them having learned silence at altitude. You sit on a low wall. The pilot lowers herself beside you without asking permission, which is the same as being invited when life has earned its liberties. For a time, neither of you speaks. A child passes with a paper plane, immaculate in its intentions, its creases brave and precise. The child throws it poorly. It turns, tumbles, finds a strange balance, and glides farther than its thrower deserved. He chases it, laughing, and the paper returns to his hand as if the sky had learned forgiveness. The pilot watches with a look that could be mistaken for sorrow and is not. There, she says softly. A good landing. She stands, thanks you with a nod as if you had done something for her, and walks away into a day that grants her the dignity of distance. You close your eyes. For an instant, the air grows thinner, sharper. A ribbon touches your wrist, though no ribbon is there. A map that does not exist folds itself neatly along creases your hands remember anyway. When you open them again, the world has not changed. It has merely decided to honor its quiet. Somewhere high, too high for sound, too close for forgetting, a small plane you cannot see finishes a gentle turn and lines up for home. The wind carries a faint breath across your face, not cold, not warm, simply present, as if night itself had come back to check the doors and was satisfied by what it found. The image holds. A ribbon in a museum. A paper plane over a sidewalk. A woman smaller than her story, walking like weather that has kept its promise. The sky does not speak. It remembers. Epilogue. The night belongs to memory. The sea at night is a sound before it is a sight. You stand at its edge, a thin border where the world forgets to separate sky from water. Waves turn in the dark, patient and endless, carrying voices too old to name. Salt brushes your lips. Wind curls through your hair. Somewhere, a gull cries and then reconsiders. You breathe in, and the air tastes faintly of iron and smoke, as if history has dissolved into it. Above, the stars hang low and deliberate, like lamps lit for travelers who never quite returned. Their light has crossed decades to reach you, soft and certain, proof that distance is just another kind of endurance. You think of them, the women who flew not for glory, not even for victory, but for the fragile thread of duty stretched between fear and purpose. Their wooden wings, their frostbitten hands, their maps drawn by memory alone. They flew when the night forgot its mercy, and in doing so, they taught the sky how to forgive itself. Now, the world they saved turns quietly beneath these same stars. The rivers run clean again. Fields grow where the runways once slept. Children chase paper planes through the grass, unaware that the air they move through remembers. Every whisper of wind carries a trace, a faint echo of canvas, of courage, of laughter wrapped in frost. Every breeze is a diary without ink. Some nights, when the wind comes from the east, the sound changes. You might hear it if you're patient. A thin, steady hiss, like silk torn very carefully. Not thunder, not machinery. Just a reminder that the night once had a heartbeat. And if you listen longer still, you can almost hear them counting the seconds between stars. Their voices soft as snow melting on glass. Their laughter moving just out of reach. Not gone, only higher. History will call them many things. Pilots, pioneers, soldiers, symbols. But the truth is simpler. They were women who learned to speak the language of air, who made fragility a weapon and silence an anthem, who took the world's most impossible hour and made it fly. Their story is written not in monuments or medals, but in the way the night itself bends a little when you pass through it, the way a gust of wind pauses, as if bowing its head. You watch the horizon shift, a slow bloom of silver where dawn begins to think about arriving. The sea breathes again, the air cools with promise, and the stars fade one by one, not extinguished but recalled, as if the heavens were gathering their centuries. You think of that old field somewhere in the east, now overgrown with birch and clover. A red ribbon still clings to one of the trees, frayed and sun-bleached, but stubborn. When the wind moves through it, the fabric flutters softly, like a wing remembering its purpose. It's easy to imagine one of them there, her hair white, her hands still smelling faintly of oil and rain, closing her eyes as the air moves past her face, whispering something only the sky would understand. Maybe she's not asking for remembrance. Maybe she's just checking that the world is still breathing. The tide slides forward, polite, insistent. You step back. The wind rises and falls, tracing invisible paths over the water. For a moment, you could swear you hear engines in the distance, low, even, familiar, and a soft gliding sound, as if the night were adjusting its wings. You close your eyes. The noise fades. The sea returns. But the feeling stays, because that's how echoes work. They linger, reshaping silence into something that listens back. Now, breathe in. Let the present dissolve. Let the air grow thin, the stars return, the frost settle again on the wings of memory. Imagine their planes rising once more, tiny shapes, patient and certain, stitched into the fabric of the dark. Imagine their laughter trailing behind them, the sound of home carried forward. And as the night folds itself shut, as the sea exhales one last hush, you realize the simplest truth of all. The sky never stopped keeping them. It only waits for someone quiet enough to hear. The sky that remembers. Morning comes slowly to the steppe. The horizon bleeds from blue to grey, from grey to gold. Frost melts into dew, dew into breath. The air smells of fuel and thawing grass. And above it all, the sky hums with what remains. Not engines, not gunfire, but the faintest pulse of memory. The planes are gone now. The night has folded its wings and drifted west. Only the scars in the grass remain, a scattered pattern of takeoffs and landings, lifelines scratched into frozen earth. A field once filled with motion is now perfectly still. You can almost hear the absence, a silence so complete it rings. The women who flew from here are older now, those who survived. Some lived long enough to see their medals tarnish, their stories rewritten or forgotten. Some died nameless, their remains never found. Others simply vanished into ordinary lives, returning to kitchens, classrooms, and villages that could not understand what they had been. Because how do you return from a sky that once belonged to you? How do you explain the weight of silence at 500 feet, or the way frost forms on your lashes at midnight while the world burns beneath you? They were called the night witches, but they were not witches, only women who refused to surrender what they could give. They took what little they had, plywood, cloth, courage, and made of it something vast. In a war that tried to turn them into ghosts, they chose instead to fly. Each night they rose from fields like this one, the smell of oil thick in their lungs, the frost tightening around their fingers. They flew without radios, without armor, without fear. When the moon was too bright, they flew in pairs, one to distract, one to strike. When the sky was too dark, they flew by instinct, by breath, by the invisible map of trust drawn between them. They learned to become part of the night itself, not cutting through it, but belonging to it. The wind was their camouflage, the stars their compass, and the quiet their greatest weapon. You stand where they once stood, and the cold still feels familiar, patient, endless, indifferent. A crow circles above the field, black against the pale sky. You wonder if it remembers their shape, those wooden wings whispering across the horizon. Perhaps it does. Perhaps the world itself remembers, in the way the air still holds the echo of propellers, in the way the grass still leans slightly east, as if waiting for their return. Their stories, once dismissed as legend, have become something more solid now. Not myth, not memory, but a kind of compass pointing toward what human beings are capable of when all else is stripped away. They remind us that courage is not loud. It is not the shout before the charge or the medal after the mission. It is the steady hand tightening a scarf in the dark, the calm voice saying, "One more flight." Even the enemy gave them their name in fear, Nakthexen, the night witches. But beneath the superstition was respect, because every soldier who heard that whispering glide overhead knew death had learned to fly quietly. As the war ended, they were told to stand down. Their planes were grounded, their regiment dissolved. The world no longer needed them, or perhaps the world had simply forgotten how much it did. They went home with calloused hands and unspoken memories. The night grew empty without them. But history, like the sky, remembers. It keeps their flight paths written in invisible ink, lines of light across darkness, tracing what it means to endure. Every time a woman steps into a cockpit, a part of that lineage awakens. Every time someone faces fear with quiet resolve, the night witches rise again. You close your eyes and listen. There it is, faint, distant, but clear enough to feel. The rhythm of wooden wings cutting through cold air, the hush of wind stitched with purpose. They're still flying, somewhere beyond dawn. Remember them. Not just for their bravery, but for their grace, for the way they carried death and life in the same fragile frame and called it duty, for the way they taught the night to sing. Now, let the noise of today fade away. Let the stillness fill the room, the heart, the hour. And if the wind taps gently at your window tonight, don't close it. It's just the night, remembering its witches. Thank you for listening. You've been part of Echoes of War, where stories rise on quiet wings, and the past still circles above us, refusing to land. You're listening to Echoes of War.